yet. Yeah.
Okay.
Cody from Columbia River Seed. Welcome to our perennial cover grower series. We put this together because I'm new to agriculture is being as immersed as I am right now with the co-op, and some of the things that stood out to me as I started talking to growers about the product we're going to talk about today, Radix Hybrid Bluegrass, Oakville Bluegrass, is just it seems like there's been some growers have a different expectation sometimes about what success feels like, looks like, how to get success with a perennial cover. And I actually would expand that expectations management, not just with the Radix Hybrid, but to a lot of perennial species if they're using them as a cover. So
100%.
that kind of stimulated the idea that, throwing out, the soil builder mix that everybody's doing that creates a ton of forage and vegetation versus doing a very intentional, perennial species planting that's going to be with your orchard or vineyard for 5, 10, 15 years. They're just two very different mental models. And so the prep that goes into it, the thought process of how you're going to maintain it is different. Expectations are different. So we've set this series up to talk to growers like you, producers like you, that are producing, distributing, and helping produce, growers put perennial seed on the ground successfully. And so looking to get, what's the history of Columbia River Seed? Who are you guys? What do you do? What's your superpower as a organization? And then I want to drill down into this seed, this hybrid bluegrass, talk about its superpowers, and then how a vineyard or orchard producer can be successful with it. So tell us about Columbia River Seed.
For sure, I'd love to, and hopefully I can share some things that maybe open some idea boxes for people. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in Eastern Oregon on a ranch and /farm, and my parents had an equipment dealership, and I ran the ranch, and my brother is now running the equipment dealership. And I went to Washington State University to study field crop management, and I have a minor in turfgrass science and a minor in field crop management. So all that to say, I was doing some turf breeding in college, and my future employer at the time decided he wanted to bring me on board to do some native grass breeding, as well as manage fields and do the agronomy side of things for him. So I ended up doing that for a couple of years and did agronomy and breeding for him. And then I found an opportunity here at Columbia River Seed, my background being in equipment and things like that. We used to build stuff at the shop. We used to design and engineer and construct farm equipment for people. And, I got the opportunity to come down here and they wanted to rebuild the seed plants. And so my role with Columbia River Seed is, my technical title is the operations manager. And a lot of people ask me what that means. And it's like any small
do anything that is needed in the moment.
The toilets aren't clean or whatever. Right. So it's just part of the drill. But I was a little concerned that, I went to school to get away from turning wrenches and I was getting back into it, but that hasn't been the job at all. And I've loved every bit of it. So
cool.
That's kind of where I'm at now. Columbia River Seed was founded in the fall of 2002. So we were ultimately 6. It was 5 at the time, eventually ended up being 6 when it was all said and done. 6 mainly onion growers that used Kentucky bluegrass as a rotation on their operation. And essentially what we do, Columbia River Seed, is we process, market, blend, and breed all of the grass that's grown in the South Lower Columbia River Basin. And that was all a brainchild of these 6 growers that got together and said, hey, We've been growing grass since 1985. It's time for us to get our own cleaner and our own marketing and go forth and conquer. So that was 2003. At the time, we were cleaning about 9 million pounds of product. Today, a lot of things have changed. We've gone away from a lot of labor, and we're fully automated from stem to stern. So we package in 2 packaging lines. We package roughly 40 to 50 million pounds of seed annually, depending on what we've bought and brought in versus what we've cleaned. We'll clean about 35 million pounds on average, and that can be, like last year was 29. This year it's going to be 37. 2022 we cleaned 43, and then we ship more than that because we're buying stuff, bringing it in, and blending it with our components and moving it out to people like you guys, or even wholesale, national, regional T&O segments. Like True Green is an example. One of our customers.
Is it still primarily, or is it focused on turf grasses, or grasses that would be considered potentially a turf grass?
Our bread and butter is cool season turf grass species.
Okay.
So we breed. We do everything from the breeding to getting it to the end user in turf type tall fescue, perennial ryegrass, Kentucky bluegrass, and all of the 5 major fine fescue species: slender, chewing, scraper, hard, and sheet. And that is the majority of what we do. Now, my job, I have a natural disposition to enjoy dealing with more of the natives, and I have a cover crop program that I've started here. And so, my job isn't necessarily just operations. With a breeding background, I breed cover crops in-house here, and I assist with some of the breeding work in Kentucky bluegrass and perennial ryegrass. And then I travel all over. I have my own. So there's 3 of us that kind of operate the business. We have our general manager, who's our international sales guy, and we have Ryan, who is our North American sales guy, really, in cool season turf, and then myself. And I sell cool season turf as well as an array of cover crop products, and bulbous I put in that category.
Right.
That's really, it's an understory operation is what it's designed to do, whether that be in the Midwest or out west.
Yeah. It's interesting. The couple questions come to mind with the onions and the turf grasses. Were they running the turf grasses and then were they seeding the onions into that turf grass, or it was a complete changeover? They were using the grass as a
true cover crop believer, no-till / cover crop believer, I don't look upon it with disdain.
What they were doing.
It's close because I can share my screen and kind of show everybody where we're located and what we do. So essentially, there's Washington, Oregon, Idaho. We buy seed out of the Willamette Valley, but a very limited amount. And we produce seed basically in this area. If you can see my mouse, maybe not.
Connell down to Walla Walla.
Even, we do produce some seed kind of up here in this Moses Lake, Othello area. But most of our seed is produced right around here. So our plant sits right here.
Okay.
We process seed from Oregon and we process seed from Washington. And I process and contract and work with products on the cover crop side of things out of LeGrand.
Are those more the natives that would be?
Those are more cover crop things that to the farm are a lower return item. And so This is a growing area where the costs of land rent are significantly less, like less than half. I grew up here in Baker City. So I kind of I'm fond of the area. I believe in those guys. I know all the growers, and I'm trying to provide them with opportunities to diversify their farm and increase the amount of diversity they have, phenotypically speaking.
Sure.
We also produce mustard, and we have our own varieties of mustard and radish. We produce mustard, radish, turnips, clovers, but mostly the brassicas out here in Pendleton. And then all of this ground here in the South Columbia River Basin and even the North Columbia River Basin, all of that, the reason why this is important is two things, so that we can kind of set the stage here for understanding the growing season in this area. Number one, we get 7 inches of rainfall annually. So every single acre that produces anything besides downy brome and sagebrush has water out of either the Columbia River, the Umatilla River, or wells in some extreme cases, but very few. So back to your question about onions, what's their MO? Well, they're essentially, all of the soils in this area are extremely sandy, like beach sandy. And so in the summertime, we're watering for evapotranspiration rates, and we can evaporate more than we can get in the ground. So essentially in the summertime, this time of year, typically in crops like onions and potatoes and corn, they just leave the pivots on and they stay on because they can't get enough water on. Either it runs through the sand or it goes into the atmosphere. Now, that being said, you've got essentially 500,000 irrigated acres in the Columbia Basin that use less than 7% of the Columbia River water, or snake water for that matter. So a lot of irrigated area that actually doesn't use, it uses a lot of water, but in terms of the size of the Columbia, it's nothing.
No. But the turf grass they were using was between seasons. So would they do onion, turf, or something like that?
So what we're doing essentially, a lot of grass seed production in the Pacific Northwest is perennial production, where they'll plant a field in either spring or fall, depending on where you're at, and then that field will produce seed the following summer. And in the perennial production areas, which is more over here in this part of the world, and then the Willamette Valley, those fields will produce, depending on the species, for 5, 10, 15, in the case of orchard grass, like 35 years, those fields will stay and produce seed. Kentucky bluegrass in the dryland areas, they'll do 5 years max, and then they'll come out. But in our area, for our production, essentially what we have is it's an annual cropping system. So really what we're looking at is strictly rotation. They make money on it, yes, but when your land rent is $1,142 an acre, the margins are really tight. And they really care about the onion crop. Now, that being said, in onions, some of your producers, some of your people on this call are probably going to be producers that grow onions or specialty crops like that, and they understand that you cannot have any weeds out there, period, end of story. And so that's, I'm circling all the way back around to essentially say with our soils, the reason I did have a small level of disdain with our production area is that it's literally a petri dish. We're pumping into it exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. We're using bluegrass as a rotation to break up that weed cycle. And then we're back into a root producing crop, whether that's carrots for Bolthouse or Grimway, or potatoes for Simplot / Lamb Weston, or peas for Lamb Weston / Smith Foods. It's so my owners, to put it this way, make up about 30% of the North American onion supply. and they're
so grass is a side hustle.
Grass for them sucks, and they'll tell you that, and it's like, hey.
Interesting background. I didn't know you had some of like the sheep fescue and some of the other more native type perennial grasses.
We process roughly 85% of the hard and sheep fescue in North America through our plant.
Okay,
regardless of who you buy it from.
Okay, so turf grasses that you're shipping worldwide, literally for the purpose of turf, and then here we're talking perennial cover for orchards and vineyards. Was the cover cropping in the context that we're talking about, was that always there, or did that kind of come up with this Radix hybrid and its superpowers, which we should get into? I want to talk about some of the other seeds and crops that you've got for cover, because maybe there's a mixing a seed mix opportunity also. But obviously the main thing that we've been leaning on CRS for is this Radix hybrid, which has some unique characteristics that really stand out as being, maybe, uniquely designed for vineyards and orchards.
Sure. So kind of the history of RHB, essentially when it was in its infancy, the patent inventors, so to speak, came to us. We had a history with those guys and in other crops, and they said, we want to see, we believe in this to do X, Y, Z. We want you guys. So because we do handle so much turf and we take it from a handful of breeder seed all the way up to millions of pounds, part of that process is our seed stock production portion of our company. So we'll run 125 acres annually to produce and blow up varieties that are, in our future, or varieties that we currently have that we need more seed stock for the following year. So they knew about that process, and essentially they wanted us to do that for them with our HB, and then at the same time learn about how to grow it. They had a small idea of how to do that, and then they wanted to kind of lean on us to figure out, commercially speaking, what are the main things we need to be doing. And we learned a lot. I mean, that was almost 10 years ago now that we started that process. I wasn't here, obviously, when that started, but I have a natural affinity for cover crops. I believe in them and the process. And I believe, it's my firm belief that as a nation, we're severely lacking in our knowledge and in usage and application of the wide diversity of things we have at our disposal.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely on my agenda. It's on my punch list to try and make some of those things more available to people and help them understand how to grow them. And so, at that time, Paul was dealing more with the bulbous thing, and then I came on board and just with as many irons in the fire as we have, he was kind of like, here you go, it's on your plate. So
how do you describe the POA, the Radix hybrid? We call it Oakville Bluegrass. It's a hybrid bluegrass. It's a unique hybrid bluegrass.
Why that those guys came to us. We're obviously one of the largest handlers and processors and marketers of Kentucky bluegrass in North America. And RHB is Radix hybrid bulbosa, and really what it is it's a hybrid between Kentucky bluegrass and Poa bulbosa, so Poa pratensis and Poa bulbosa, which is bulbous bluegrass. And so what we achieved through that cross, and there's obviously a wide diversity in the varieties that are available today, which I'll show you some pictures of, is more longevity in the stand life of the product, because the ultimate goal is to plant it once and maybe touch it up 5 years later or 10 years later. We still don't really know the ultimate length of stand that we can achieve out of it, because I haven't seen it die yet where it was its own fault. I've seen things where there's holes in it because we put cows out on it for 6 months and they went out and pulled it all out of the ground. Well, that's not really a fault of the product, but it is something to be aware of, that growers need to be aware of, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the history of RHB, and we've been growing and processing it since, and it's a very unique creature. I'll show you some pictures of the bulbs, the bulbils, as they're called. We call it seed, even though it's not.
Technically it's not seed. So when I talk to growers about this cover option, this perennial cover option, I talk about that it's got low stature compared to a lot of other cover crop systems, especially the annuals. It's cool season perennial, so it's going to wake up on its own when it's got water and temperatures that are right. And it's also photo period dormant, which means it puts itself into dormancy on its own, based on 12 hours of sunlight, which is effectively, first day of spring is when it should be shutting down. But then I also learned it's got some growing degree dormancy. So it's heat. It's got a heat induced dormancy, which we saw this last March, early, because we were so warm in California in March. Are those am I using the right words, or how would you describe those mechanisms in this grass that set it apart from another cover, a different perennial system?
Yeah, no, I think those are all the correct terminologies. Essentially, you've got some weird things that you have to really consider and think about differently than you would with a lot of other seeded crops. Mm-hmm. So where it's a bulb, seed depth is a huge factor, and soil prep is a huge factor. And what we've seen is that depending on the situation, you may choose to apply the product differently depending on how you're going to apply it and when you're going to apply it. I'm trying to get my thing to share here. I'm not really sure what's going on.
We had a picture. Looked like
which I was trying to get a slideshow in here. Okay. What's showing now?
Nothing's showing now.
Okay. How about now? Probably nothing still. Okay. Well, I'm just going to have to do this differently.
Okay.
Let's go. I had a slideshow, but we're going to just go through the pictures one by one here as we talk about them.
All right. So, cool season, perennial, short stature, photo period dormancy. I feel like that's the thing that sets it apart the most. Heat
for sure.
dormancy.
And one thing that's not really talked about enough with bulbous is that no matter that dormancy is active, like you say, because of temperature and photo period, no matter how much water you put on it or how much fertilizer you give it.
Yeah, so it's not sealing nutrients or water.
It's the only species that I know of that will stay dormant once it goes dormant until it reaches the right temperatures.
Yeah. And I think that's also important, is like what activates it in the fall? What's that temperature profile, temperature moisture profile that activates it? Yeah. So run us through from wherever you want to start, but I'm thinking ideally we can cover from pre-planting through giving it some preferential treatment against weed pressure or other species that are going to get up above it, things like that, to give it some runway for success.
So I will go through here, and I'm going to go to the latest project we were working on. Essentially, can you see these pictures?
Yep.
Okay, so this picture here, so I described our climate. We get rain from, on and off, and I'm talking measured in hundreds between end of September and end of February, call it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a spot right next to our plant that we've always just sprayed the weeds on it. And I said, why aren't we just growing bulbous here? This is the whole point of this product. It's to fill in a hole like this and not have weeds. So we planted this. This is a planting in, well, you can see February 6th of this year. It was planted probably, I don't know, a week before that, because this was the first emergence we had here. And, at that time of year, the temperatures are such that it's saying, let's go. It's time to go. So we put it out here. I like to put it out in December or January, depending, because temperature isn't as much of a factor as some of the other cool season species where, you get below 40 degrees and they just don't want to do a whole lot. And
so this will germinate with temps in the low 40s or even a little bit overnights below 40.
Yeah, I mean, you can see this. So if I zoom in, this is that same day, right? So we obviously loosened up that top layer very, very lightly, and then packed it, and then spread seed and packed it again. Very basic, very simple.
Is that broadcast?
Yep.
I don't see any drill pattern on that field.
Broadcast and packed with like a Brilliant type packer.
Yeah.
So you can see it froze in this picture. And Bulbous is like, hey, let's keep on trucking. We don't see anything wrong with that as long as it's not hot. It's just, yeah. Well, even then, it doesn't really slow it down.
It'll withstand it. It'll withstand it.
It's what it's programmed to do.
Right.
So this is February 12th. So you're 6 days later.
Okay.
And then February 25th.
Okay. The pattern showing up there. Yeah.
Yep. So you can see my packer rings wherever there was a packer ring, that seed settled, and that's where it decided to pop up, which is why, I hit on that when I'm talking to people. Packing is the most important step.
One question I've got is this last year, more so than in recent years, but the Central Valley is notorious for fog. And this last season, we had a lot of fog. We had a couple weeks or more of daily, pea soup, hard to see the sun until 2, 3 in the afternoon. How sensitive is it to that type of situation in terms of establishment?
It's not.
Okay.
No, that should not affect your establishment really whatsoever. As long as you're not extended freezing, day after day after day, then you'll start seeing an effect.
Okay.
So March 16th, March 24th, March 24th.
Yeah.
March 27th. And then this video. So this particular planting,
this is
essentially, I would argue, we planted way too heavy. This is probably 150 pounds an acre.
Okay.
And it's too heavy because what happens, you start getting hot, you can kind of start seeing those patches brown out. It's competing against itself.
Interesting.
And
now we've been prescribing 150 pounds an acre, probably defensively, being concerned about establishment.
Well, yes, but in a lot of situations, guys aren't going to have seed beds prepped to the ultimate degree, and maybe I'm light. Maybe it was 200 pounds an acre. All I know is we dumped a lot of bags, and it's not it's not an acre. So you can see in this video on the left-hand side, you have what we established in 2026. And on the right-hand side is what I established the previous December/January.
Okay.
And really the reason that's significant is because the plant starts to be able to grab gears that following year. Once there's an actual crown there and established stand, and you can see, you know, the stuff on the left is not even thinking about being reproductive. Stuff on the right's like in the boot stage. It's got seed heads trying to pop out of it, and this is
and that brings something up. Like, you know, I get the sense that, you know, perennial grasses like this in their first year aren't going to look like the soil builder mix with a bunch of brassica and legumes and those. It's not going to look the same. So they're not going to get that visual cue of success. My concern is that if a grower sees this, they're going to say, "Oh, it didn't work. Like, it didn't do what I'm used to it doing." But really, if you've got germination, if you have some vegetation, some of that grass is showing up, that next season, it could really take off.
Yeah.
Like, don't come in and diss this because it didn't, because you think it didn't work, right?
Yeah, that's the worst thing you want to do. The most important thing you want to do in that establishment year is make sure your weed competition doesn't exist until it goes dormant. Once it goes dormant, so you can see in this, I'm going to pause it really quick. You can see that soil, right? That's like, there's nothing there. I mean, it's literally sand and rocks. Sure. And, you know, I didn't expect it to grow there at all because there's no rainfall. There's no organic matter, you know, but it still kind of persisted there with basically no rain. And then you can see fresh stuff in the pockets that we packed even on that boundary there, because I reseeded that. So
if you had, because a lot of, I've seen in vineyards and orchards down here, there's a lot of resident vegetation. There's a lot of you know, other grasses, you know, forbs, weeds, etc. How do you, and that's what would be coming up in those pockets, and those would be coming up above it because they want to race to the sky. How do you manage the resident vegetation in a way that favors, or at least gives, the bluegrass a level playing field during that first year, or even, you know, every year? Is it clipping and mowing?
The number one thing, it's very basic, is for your broadleaves. There's a lot of options from an application perspective to just immediately get those out of the way. There should be no question, you know, as to why you have broadleaf pressure with the chemistries we have available. And even, you know, like in an organic situation, that's obviously a lot more challenging, but there are things you can put out once the bulbous is dormant to pretty much nuke everything else. And I only know that because a large percentage of our growers grow onions organically, and they're out there spraying their products to manage them in a way that they can actually produce quality onions.
Got it.
So that is the number one key. Is number one, get the broadleaf pressure out of the way. It shouldn't exist. There should be no reason for it. You know, and if you compare that to a, you know, like you're talking this brassica mix, you're going to be out there mowing that stuff, I don't know how many times, right? So a single application of a broadleaf herbicide is very, very easy to do. When it comes to grasses, yeah, I mean, it's a serious challenge. And depending on what grasses you're fighting, there's nothing you're going to put on it, even in a brassica mix, that'll kill it. Because in some of your guys' situation, from what I understand, you got rat-tail fescue and annual ryegrass. And annual ryegrass has shown resistance to almost every chemistry we have available.
Right. So then, is it mowing? Because what we think what we start to think we should prescribe is see where your bluegrass is. If it's 4 inches high and there's other weeds racing up above it, try to get in and clip that one time down to the bluegrass.
You're not going to hurt the bluegrass by doing that. And absolutely, yes. As long, if you can open up the canopy and allow it to get some sunlight without competition, and maybe you don't kill the weeds, but you set them back a couple of weeks, that might be all you need to get the bluegrass to a spot where it decides, okay, we're going to go dormant. And then from there, you have the option after it's dormant to put out pretty much any chemistry, really, to combat your other weeds.
So dormancy, March 21st, 12 hours of sunlight, what, 2-3 weeks later? So by mid-April, somebody, if they're conventional and they want to put something down, they could do that, or how much further out?
I don't know what the dates are for your area. For my area, I can tell you pretty much by a week after tax day, we're done. Okay.
So mid to late April, it's dormant.
We're done. We're starting to brown down. And even, okay, so that's Iowa. Let's go. Where's my other pictures here? I thought I had pictures of, let's just go down to, because I'll show you what I did. Okay, here we go. So I took this morning just to kind of demonstrate, it's not that we didn't have other grass pressure. We're a grass seed plant. So we have seed blowing around all over the place. And we actually have a pretty high seed load in this particular spot, because it's literally on the end of the prevailing winds from where all the seed blows as we're unloading it out of trucks. And you can see, obviously, I've killed all of this is perennial ryegrass right in here. All this stuff's perennial ryegrass. There's Kentucky bluegrass out there. But again, we gave it every chance possible, right? So we're trying to establish bulbous at a time where other species can't even think about coming out of the ground.
Right.
That is one of the natural shields that it has going for it, is once you get it popping and going, if you can manage everything on the back end of that, there's really, a lot of things you can do to prevent holes in your establishment, which is what you'll see if you have a massive weed pressure, albeit grasses or broadleaves. And, like these holes here, they're really just from a lack of moisture.
Okay.
More than anything else. So you can see my tire tracks here. I sprayed this maybe a little early. It was starting to brown down. I think I sprayed it like April 15th or something like that. And it wasn't quite brown down yet. So I'll be super curious to see if I killed it or not.
Yeah. So I want to throw a curveball here. If we're seeding it with a drill or a brilliant seeder, it's going to be patchy, like just what you can see the pattern, and there's some open space between each clump like that.
Sure.
And in the first year, it might be very unimpressive and very small. Is there a reason or purpose or way to do a mix? Do like a micro clover with this, or you've got sheep fescue, hard fescue. Is there a value in doing a mix up front to have some diversity along with the bluegrass? And will the bluegrass take over time, or what are your thoughts on that? Because a lot of people do want biodiversity.
Yeah, and I can understand that. Obviously, like I said, I'm a true believer on the cover crop front. This particular product, I'm not sure we've figured out yet how do I word this? How to achieve that and still achieve establishment. My best advice, because your timing of planting on this and pretty much everything else are two different things. So my best advice is, let's get it established and then drill
overseed.
in
overseed
your less competitive options.
Okay.
Micro clover probably will take over eventually, just because of the nature of that product. It's got massive stolons and they run across the ground and root. And year one, you've got a plant the size of a coffee cup, and year two, it's the size of a
coffee table.
It's the size of my, office.
Exactly.
So, I'm not saying it's not an option, but, within reason. The other thing too is picking something to put in there, whether it's, and in your environment, clover might not be what I'm trying to say, but in mine, where it gets cold enough, clover kind of goes dormant. And so if you can time your diversity and the products that you're putting in there so that, because ultimately the goal in the 30,000 foot view of your lens and the project is, how do we keep the soil living 365 days out of the year, right? So if you can find something that, like a warm season that will get up and get going about the time bulbous is about to tip over,
right,
then ultimately you have this green bridge where you're bridging all those gaps, and the warm season can handle the heat you guys have down there too.
Yeah.
So
I think on the nut producer side, I think biodiversity would take a backseat to ease of management, and so they don't want that warm season grass growing. They want the roots in the soil and this thing to shut down.
Grass, not necessarily talking about grass. There are warm season clover options. But that's really this next video, and the reason that I did it this morning was especially for the nut growers, right? So in a lot of cover crop mixes and even like vineyard mixes, you have massive crowns, and essentially the soil is just like, it's like walking through a pasture. And if you were going to try to sweep nuts off the floor, it's not going to happen. And so
wispy.
Bulbous, well, it's like 6 inches of like break your ankle type stuff.
Yeah.
And when bulbous goes dormant, literally everything above ground just goes away.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to sweep in something like this, when you sweep it, you're going to have as close to bare dirt as you're going to get with a cover crop species underneath the trees.
Yeah. Well, and give that 6 to 8 more weeks for late August to October harvest.
Exactly.
It's just gonna be wispy, and it's gonna just blow away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why and how this product shines in those applications. And I really believe, I'm not saying that diversity is not an option. I think there's a lot more that needs to be explored there to try and line up the timings with bulbous. Because I can tell you this, if you have something that's green and really aggressive and it's growing at the same time as the bulbous, give it 2 years and you're not going to see bulbous. Unfortunately, that is an Achilles heel of the product.
Yeah.
But I've also never seen anything that can literally take a nuke, like, literally a nuke, and come back the next fall, next spring.
We've got a wine grower in Napa who's put this down, and they mow for some kind of weed control. It's got other stuff in it. Like it's not like a golf course turf. He's got other things in it, but he knows it's mostly the bluegrass, and he's happy. He's like, yeah, I can't get rid of these things.
What other species
I can clip it.
Are in it?
Oh, I'm the wrong person to ask. But you can tell that there's other, and once it's gone dormant, because his went dormant in like March 10th, so early because of the heat wave that we had here in March. And so there are a few other things that were still growing, still there. But he did his final like post cover crop season mowing in I think early May, and just got everything back down, and he knows he's not going to have a monocrop of just bluegrass turf, but he's okay. He's like, I can't get rid of everything, so I'm going to manage it this way. And it's fine. And so I think there's always going to be some kind of competition in there, and it's cheaper to drag a mower than a till.
Well, yeah.
than a till. And you're still not there. He's not buying cover seed. You know, his neighbors are all buying tons of cover seed every year because they're doing the normal thing. But then they're disking it and turning the soil over and breaking their soil up. And so he's seen all kinds of benefits, and he's okay with the fact that there's some other grasses in there.
Well, just the water percolation infiltration alone is something that California in general needs desperately.
Yeah. Because those roots, you get a late spring rain, you get an early fall rain, you don't have any cover crop visible, but those roots are still there.
Yep.
Keeping those channels open.
Yep.
So temperature wise, when will it germinate? What's the temperature range that we need to get to germinate, which would inform us like what's too early to put it on the ground? Well, and then temperature, when does it wake up in the fall once it's coming out of dormancy?
What's your temperature like in October? 1st of October?
Oh, well, I mean, it depends on where we are in California. If I'm in Bakersfield, it's going to be different than if I'm in Sonoma. So
use Sonoma as an extreme example.
Yeah, well, overnights are below.
Get down to 40, or do they?
Sonoma less so because it's got more coastal influence. But I think we're getting down in the 40s in November.
There you go.
So you want to see below 50 or below 40? You want to see below 50 for germination?
Below 50 is what we would call the minimum.
Okay, so you want to go cooler than that. So into the 40s, overnight temps into the 40s.
Absolutely.
And then moisture's on the way.
Yep.
Okay. Is that the same dynamic for coming out of dormancy? Once overnight temps are down into the 40s, it'll start to come out of dormancy as well?
Roughly speaking, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
That's
and
what
then you showed that you could plant as late as February. To me, that's on the razor's edge of too late, because it's only going to get, even if it germinates, it's only going to get a month of growth at that point, or 6 weeks of growth.
Yep. Yeah, and what that looks like, when you do that, is essentially that video that I showed where it looked kind of crummy, right? You get it. It comes in, but it's not the stand that you're looking for. So I can't find it here now, but and that's worst case scenario: sandy soils, rocks.
We had a grower. I don't know if you remember. We had a grower that took a delivery of some seed in late January, and just circumstances had it to where they didn't put the seed on the ground or drilled it until like February like 8th or 9th.
Okay.
And they were not impressed by the results. And I mentioned to them a couple times that, like, if you saw anything, like if anything came up as unimpressive as it was, don't till it. Like you're gonna, those roots are in the ground, and it may surprise you this next season what it comes back
as. Well, the other thing too is just by the nature of the bulbil, you really, depending on how hard your soil is, when you come back on, if he wants to touch that up, you're not going to need to till it.
Okay.
Your timing is proper.
You mean he could broadcast it?
For sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about the other thing about tilling, or not tilling, but drilling the seed. You said in some of the conversations we've had that you'd rather see this seed just on the surface than too deep.
Yep. So your opportunity.
What's that? What's the bracket that we've got to work within here?
Your opportunity for success is much higher if it's on the surface than more than 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch deep. If you put it deeper than and really I should say an eighth, because a lot of the time when you're in the field and you're walking behind the drill and you're getting everything set up, you might feel like you're a quarter, and then a rain comes and now it's a half, just because of how it works. We've seen very poor establishments with, professional seed growers at a quarter of an inch.
Okay.
So that's why I always say, we're talking about trying to do like more of a turf application of the product rather than an agricultural application. Top is always better. Yeah. And, even in some situations, if you've worked the dirt and it's too loose and you go on top, it's still too deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
really on top and roll just to make good contact.
That is the best case scenario.
Okay.
Yeah. On top, proper timing, you can't beat it. I've never seen anything better than that particular situation. And again, we've been growing this stuff for almost 10 years. And like, I'll show you an example. Here's a field that was drilled in 2020. Well, this would have been planted in 2022. Mm-hmm. So this would have been after it was established. This would have been the fall after it was established. And this field would have been planted at about 8 pounds an acre.
8 pounds?
8 pounds. Underwater.
Jeez.
But this is like, we would consider this barely acceptable on a stand establishment in commercial production.
What do you mean by underwater?
Under center pivot irrigation.
Okay.
So this is like pie in the sky. You've got everything going for it. One
Optimal
thing you don't have going for it on this exact farm. So there's another one. Here's coming out of February 2nd, right? Coming out of really hard winter we had that year. But essentially, what the reason I show that and what I'm trying to say is, the soil on this farm is very similar to some of the orchards that you guys have, where they seal off. Mm-hmm. That top layer is just like concrete. Mm-hmm. And those are situations where you get it just the slightest bit too deep, and you will not see establishment. It just bulbous does not like that, and neither does Kentucky bluegrass or some of the other species. Ryegrass will power through, but Kentucky bluegrass, you get it the slightest bit too deep, and you'll extend. In Kentucky bluegrass, you'll extend your establishment by a month if you get an establishment. So that's why I always say, get yourself in a situation where you're loose enough you can pack it back up and broadcast it and pack it and call it a day, because that is going to be your best case scenario. You can't get it too deep when you do that and throw your product away, so to speak. But these fields were drilled with for argument's sake, set of John Deere 455 drills, double disc. And again, I don't have pictures of this field the first year because it looked like crap because he got it too deep.
Okay.
And so, this is an example where, even after a year, you still can see some of those things coming through. Those bulbs don't necessarily just mold away. And
right.
But I can tell you, I actually was going through my phone this morning looking for pictures of that because I wanted to show how bad it was and what it looked like, basically 12 months later.
Yeah.
But you can't really see in this picture, but that grass is about 6 inches tall.
No, I mean, it looks great. The thing that's blowing me away is that under really good, cultivation conditions with irrigation and whatnot, timed water and things along those lines, 8 pounds an acre can do a lot. And I think getting to a point of having in the orchard or vineyard context with all the other things happening and that are being scheduled and managed, it's hard to get perfect conditions, but boy,
For sure.
there's room to focus on year one establishment and come in with a lot less seed.
Absolutely,
Like,
there is.
there's a trade-off there. Obviously, buying more seed, it's like that dopamine hit. I bought more seed, I spent more money, but you could spend half as much
If a
money
little's
and
good,
take
a
the
lot's
extra time
better,
on
right?
establishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
But
and
maybe
the
not.
main reason why we've recommended that 75 to 150 pound rate is because the weed pressure is real. And the only way to get around that in the very beginning is making sure you have a good establishment. And even in those situations, you just have weeds that are so aggressive. Good luck. Most of those, in my experience, have been broadleaf weeds, though, that still pop through the canopy, and
which
then
you can treat for while the bluegrass is
whenever,
growing.
whenever.
You can spray over the top of this with that broadleaf treatment.
So, and again, this is in, you can do that between November 1 and February 1, and you don't have vines that are actively growing, or you don't have trees that are leaved out and things like that are going to cause you other issues. So that's why I say from the seed I'm sitting in, it's the number one lowest hanging fruit that we can be really proactive on and set yourself up for success. One thing you don't see when you have those broadleaf pressures is everything around it underneath the leaves, it's bulbous, it wants to go away. And so just that simple act of real early broadleaf application to just prevent yourself from having a stand loss in patches is really important. And that's what I did with the establishment. I did one last winter and I did one this winter. And essentially that's what I did. I came on really early with broadleaf to make sure. Now, another thing I've been experimenting with, and this fall I'm going to do a more scientifically proven approach here, is pre-emerge chemistry. I was
going to ask about pre-emergence because
I don't know what your growers have access to in their situations, but from what I understand, there's some really aggressive pre-emerge chemistries that have quite a lasting effect. And I'm going to do a trial this fall in a bulbous bluegrass establishment. I don't know what's true and what's not true, but I have a suspicion that since it's not a seed, some of these pre-emerge chemistries may not have an effect or as big of an effect on bulbous as they do other species.
Right.
Again, I don't know that that's true. That's my hypothesis. Obviously, I'd love for it to be true. This winter, I did a strip above the pictures that I showed you on the hill, and we were planting in like January, February, and I just took my backpack sprayer. It's got a regular T-jet nozzle on it, so it's about 20 or 30 inches wide, and I went straight through our new planting in a straight line because I wanted to see, and I can't remember if I had Prowl or Outlook. It's been so long I didn't document it, but the point is it was one of the two. And to this day, I can see a strip where there isn't Russian thistle and there isn't red stem fillery, and there isn't pretty much anything. And there is bulbous bluegrass there. So
interesting.
It was a step in my hypothesis that kind of made me think, is the bulbous stand there better or worse? I'm not really sure. I can tell. But it's a big enough deal that I'm going to do like a real trial this fall and see what kind of results we get with varying roots, so that in various chemicals to just really get as much of an unbiased answer as possible. Because, if that is an option, I think that's a huge option for some of the issues that we've aforementioned in this species.
Yeah, looking at some of the conversations with a couple of the growers that didn't feel like they had success a couple of years ago. The hypothesis there was that they had pre-emergence still in the soil.
Sure.
From maybe 6 months, or they had a history. They had a history of pre-emergence in the orchard for decades.
Right.
And the hypothesis was that was stunting or preventing the bulbs from coming in. But they also may have planted it too deep. It's hard to know just reading through some emails about what really.
There's a lot of variables when you're
Right.
new to the species. I get it.
Yeah. No, this is great. I was going to ask about pre-emergence if you've got a history of pre-emergence in your orchard or vineyard, like how that might affect it. Having, to me, there'd be a caution sign initially, but if you guys
that's
can
my
test it out and see what works, that'd be great.
Whoa, hold on.
Right.
But that's kind of why I want to do the trial, because I want to know the truth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, this is great. I appreciate you taking the time on this and running through pictures and what success can look like. Also, what it looks like in that first year of establishment, because I think it's going to look different than what they're doing right now as a cover, and so visually it won't be the same. But
sure.
Gosh, what's that?
So I can run through some of these here.
Yeah.
This is actually a trial that I did on the production farm. We wanted to look at various different varieties for lots of different reasons. Bulb production. We wanted to look at color. We wanted to look at dormancy timing, because we have seen a massive variance in dormancy timing depending on the variety. This trial doesn't exist anymore, but I did have it in for maybe 4 years. This is that same trial at a reproductive stage. And what's really interesting is you can see all the off types in that. And so, that's what happens when you allow it to go to seed, so to speak, and let those bulbils drop on the ground. And literally with some of the hardest potential, I explained to you guys the soil type out there. It's like rock hard. And, we've taken all the seed off the field, or so we thought, with swathers and combines. You're going to have residue. So essentially what you've got is the least viable seeds left in the field that blew out the back end of the combine. And then those off types are plants that establish themselves in the worst possible situation.
Yeah.
So that was pretty interesting to me. Same production field we talked about, different production field we talked about. October 11th, February 2nd.
Will it reproduce every year, or does it have to get to a certain age and maturity before it'll start to?
After establishment, it'll send seed heads up every year.
Okay. Which obviously, again, you get to that second year, it's so much closer to long-term success. Like getting past the first year.
The other thing is too, as you get into older stands, you'll see dormancy come sooner, and you will see, for argument's sake, green up a little earlier in the fall.
Right.
It's using all of its resources up faster as it's trying to go reproductive. This is a trial in Ames, Iowa. Essentially, there's like 70 different varieties there, and you can see some of the ones that are earlier that have gone reproductive earlier, and they'll go dormant significantly earlier. And so this was interesting because obviously it's a way different rainfall zone, and there were some people that were saying early on, we can't have success with bulbous in an extremely wet, saturated soil situation because the bulbs will actually rot and go away. Well, this trial in this picture is like 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
And that's the richest, blackest soil I've ever seen in my life, and it stays wet forever. So that theory is clearly wrong.
Right.
this is back here in the Pacific Northwest. That's, starting to go reproductive in production field. So here's a production field that we're probably in that situation, maybe 2-3 weeks from swathing.
Nice.
You can see the seed heads there, and you can look. So bulbous bluegrass produces a genetic clone of the parent on the actual meristem of the plant in replacement of seed, as opposed to Kentucky bluegrass.
Right.
And so that's what those things look like. They're actually there's a plant. You can see the true leaves.
Yeah.
It's almost like bulb,
right? Like how succulents, how cactus reproduce.
Yeah. So what happens is when you swath that at the plant, we have to condition it to get that off of there so that you have a product that'll flow in a drill, right?
Right.
So when that dries down, it doesn't come off very easy, and that's one of the things that we've really worked hard to try and dial in. This is much closer. This might have been so he's got half of it swathed and half of it ready to go down.
Fascinating. This is great.
You'll see in this next portion of the video how easy those bulbs come off. Right. So
I have to do my advertisement. One of the reasons we're even having this conversation is because we've got this grant at the co-op. We've got about $3.5 million to distribute for perennial seed, anything that falls under NRCS 327, conservation cover, permanent cover, perennial seed. And what you're showing here is, co-op was named after this grass. We think it's got some superpowers for orchards and vineyards, and we've also have a SARE grant, which is we're going to use to help probably three producers do a 10-acre planted seed on this specifically. We know we're doing that to go through a really good establishment process and really capture what that establishment process is from pre-plant through coming out of dormancy on the second season. And so we've got the SARE grant to do that. We've got the AMP grant with USDA to do, it could be any perennial mix, but I know we've got some growers in the olive and almond space that want to do this. And so it's going to be exciting to have more trials and having this information, and it's going to be mandatory watching to have anybody that wants to get involved with this grass to at least watch this, and then really it's the classic ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. Like getting the establishment done right is going to pay off completely. 100%. Which I think most vineyard and orchard producers get. I mean, I'm sure you put in your vineyard, it's a huge investment. You put in your orchard, it's a huge investment, and you're looking at a 25-year timeline of productivity. This is obviously not anywhere near the scale of that investment of time and resource, but it's the mindset of let's get this thing established the right way in the first year, and it's going to pay off quickly in the second and third and fourth year on, going on down the line there.
Yeah, for sure.
So, no, this is great. Is that the bulbous being processed?
So essentially, this is in our seed plant, one of them, and this is going over what's called the gravity table. Essentially, we're fluidizing the bed of product, so all of the lighter material rises to the top of that fluidized bed and rolls down the hill. The heavier products make contact with the deck and ride up to the top. So this is in bulbous, one of the ways that we're able to separate out the good heavy seeds from the light ones, or not seeds. This is a product in the bag after it's been cleaned, and what we would consider minimally acceptable. Our goal when we process bulbous is to make 100% sure that it's going to flow through a drill. We're associated with lots of different cool season grass species, and a lot of the fescues. Even professional people that are planting the stuff every day, it just will not flow through a drill because it bridges. And so, it was one of our missions in life when we clean this stuff to make sure it's conditioned in a way that the end user isn't going to be like, what the heck? We're not even growing yet and we've already got problems. So I showed you guys pictures of what that bulb looks like coming out of the field, and then is what we get it down to essentially.
Yeah, well, I also like the fact that it can be broadcast because from a resource-based perspective, we've got access to the co-op owns 2 Brilliant seeders, drop and then roll seeders. One's for vineyards, one's for orchards, but those still have costs attached to them, and broadcasting is a little less technical and usually a little less expensive in terms of.
As long as you're packing it afterwards, that's my only.
Yeah. Can I use rain to pack it?
No.
No, that doesn't. That's folklore.
Maybe not, depending on your soil type. Depends on your soil type, and depends on how much rain.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Too much rain will just blow right off.
Yeah, the best establishments I've seen have been broadcast, packed, or through a Brilliant, which is essentially the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Drop and roll. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. That's good to know. Well, this has been super informative and helpful. And I appreciate you taking some time to walk through this with us.
Well, hopefully my redneck explanation is not too informal here, but
it's the best one we've got.
That have questions or want to see more pictures or talk about it.
Yeah.
You guys have my contact information, and I'm always willing to help and talk and talk people through stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we will be forwarding questions or forwarding growers to hit you up with those as they come in. So look forward to some seed orders coming in the next few weeks.
Sure.
So we'll start tying up some inventory and getting some deliveries scheduled out in the fall.
Okay. Well.
Right on. Thank you,
Cody. And hopefully it was information that people are going to be interested to hear. So.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. All right. I'm going to end it right now. Thanks everybody, and thank you, Cody, Columbia River Seed Company, for doing this and helping us get prepped for fall planting. All right. We'll see you. Bye.